Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Stock the Fuck Up. I am here today with Travis from Capital Equity Options.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about Capital Equity and actually tell us a little bit about that and when you started the platform. When did you really start kind of spreading the word on this and what's the motive behind it?
So the motivation behind Capital Equity Options was I probably joined maybe 7 or 8 chat rooms before I ever started it. And it kind of gave me like a vendetta against them. I found that a lot of the chat rooms were, they would talk on Twitter about their winning trades and would never go over their losing trades. Once I got into their rooms, I realized that they weren't very, profitable winners, and more than less, they didn't really educate. They just gave out alerts here and there. Because I'm not doing this to get rich. I do like to be paid for my time. I think it's valuable to trade with people because there's multiple eyes in the market. As one person or one trader, we can't look at everything all at once. That's kind of the motivation behind it.
Yeah, we just recently had a really interesting guest who is an analyst and writer for a global investing company that's based in the US. Before we continue, guys, I'm going to remind you that Travis and I are not lawyers or legal advisors, and we're not telling you exactly what to do with your money. We're simply having a chat about different topics. And if you want to check out any previous episodes, by all means, check us out on Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple. So we're really just excited that we've had already over 500 downloads. So, Travis, this is probably like my first couple of years actually investing myself. It started off with a few hundred, now maybe the figures have changed a bit. It's grown for me in the last couple of years. When did you start?
I started trading about 6 or 7 years ago, but I didn't take it full time or very serious till about 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm kind of somebody that when I do something and I commit to it, I want to go full blast. So when I started, I actually erased every single social media app and anything that wasted time off of my phone. And I just spent every living second that I had in free time studying the market. I always tell people it's kind of like learning a foreign language.
Oh yeah.
And you can't cut corners, you got to learn to speak fluent.
Yeah, and we actually are having different episodes based on the vocabulary and then the application of the vocabulary. So it's really cool because even when we have guests and sometimes they use vernacular that is just not, common within the retail investor, we ask our guests to define it because it's difficult. It's difficult to learn. And as long as you have a basic understanding, then it gives you the confidence to go further. I think that's really what we're trying to do. Have people feel like, oh, I heard that before. At the end of the day, millennials were the most anxious generation, and self-esteem goes along with that. So there are people out there that are just like, man, I'm not smart enough to invest, or I don't have, I can't do this. It's about the power of confidence and can I do this? Can I start? Am I smart enough? And one of the inevitable topics, especially as the season is coming around, is taxes. This will be my first time talking to my accountant because I've never done my taxes myself. Heck no, that's just not who I am. So, Travis, what's your experience been? And we're not trying to get into the nitty gritty, like we're not trying to get into like your personal information, but more so, how would you advise that beginner, investor to go about it?
Personally, I use an accountant. I have 4 streams of revenue, so I don't care to dig through all those things. It's a small fee for an accountant. That's their profession.
Of
So
course.
that's kind of how I go about things.
Of course.
Getting into taxes though, so there's different brackets and there's different strategies for it. So it's all adjusted gross income. So that has to do with your stock gains, your crypto gains, even your full-time job if you have a regular job as well, is all going to get into this pool of where your tax bracket is, correct? So you got to look up where your tax bracket is at the end of the year. And I think the majority of people are going to fall within about the 24% range as far as short-term gains go. And then the majority is going to fall in about the 15% range as far as long-term. And long-term is something that you hold for over a year. Any short-term trading is something that you hold for under a year. So there is a large gap between the different tax brackets of those. And at the end of the year, during December, at the end of the month, the best practice that I've kind of came up with in my past and what I do now is at the end of December, I'll kind of add up where I'm at and then put myself in the tax bracket I'm there. And I'll take that money out of my trading account and put it aside. One of the worst things you could do is keep trading it. And then maybe, God forbid you go on a bad run and all of a sudden you don't have the money to pay the taxes because Uncle Sam doesn't care if your trades for, Q1 go well or not. He wants his money from last year. So I think one of the best practices is find out where you're at, take some of that money, or at least, a large portion of it, and stick it out in your bank or wherever you're not going to spend it, and actually use it as capital.
Yeah,
And
no, I mean, that sounds like a really smart plan. One of our favorite references here on this show is nerdwallet.com. And I do have a little quote here, which kind of touches upon one of the terms that Travis used. So I don't want you guys to be intimidated by some of the conversation that goes on. Please, look it up, look up some of these terms. Don't get lost in the conversation just because some of the terminology, the jargon that is related to investing may have you lose track. But he did mention the word capital gain. Now, if you're not a business owner, if you're a young trader, perhaps you just are unfamiliar. So NerdWallet defines capital gains as the profit from sale of an asset, um, shares of stock, a piece of land, a business, and generally considered taxable income. So any taxable income is a capital gain. And that's exactly what Travis referred to. How to minimize it according to nerdwallet.com. You can reduce capital gain taxes on investments by using losses to offset gains. This is called tax loss harvesting. Travis, do you have any comment on that quote from NerdWallet?
that's going to all be done by your accountant anyways. Your
Okay.
portfolio at the end of the year is going to be offset by your losses versus your gains. So it's going to be your adjusted gross, income off of your trades at the end of the year. Kind of something else that I just let my accountant deal with. And as far as write-offs go, you can write off certain things when it goes to trading. So like you buy a new computer or any sort
Right.
of,
Right.
software, anything, you can use it as a write-off and pay a little bit less taxes as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I like that we keep referring to our accountant. I mean, I'm mentioning mine as well, and that's who takes care of my stuff. And I've been bringing up this topic to him the minute that I bought my first coin, the minute that I bought my first stock. Forbes.com though says, luckily, you don't have to keep up with all of your investment profits by hand. Federal tax law requires that investment companies disclose the investment income you've earned in a given tax year. If you have an online brokerage account, which guys, we all do at this point, I'm almost positive it's 2021, the company will provide you with tax documents, including a 1099 form documenting your annual investment income. Now, like I said, guys, I like to be fully honest. This is my first year really, providing these documents to my accountant. And thankfully, one thing I've noticed, I don't know what kind of brokerage accounts you use, Travis, but on Public, you get a nice notification on Coinbase, you get a nice notification saying at the end of the year you will receive your documents for your tax season.
So I have three
So
different brokerages, but basically you can go to your desktop platform and you can look up your W-2 and just print it off. So that's what I do. I just go and print off my W-2 and then give all of them to my accountant. I went paperless a couple years ago just because, mail's kind of 19th century at this point.
yeah,
So I don't really even go through the mail necessarily. But yeah, it's super easy. Just go to the desktop website from your brokerage and you can print out your W-2s at the end of the year.
it's small details, but you definitely don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to go, oh, well, this was under $1,000 or this was under $5,000, so this doesn't count. And unfortunately, obviously, without disclosing any names, I've heard that in chats. I've heard that in groups. People are giving each other advice that just sounds a little sus, a little, little weird. And I'm like, let the experts take care of it. So, Travis, aside from the business that you're running, which is really cool. We mentioned that earlier on in the conversation and kind of why what was the motive behind it, which I thought was really awesome. But yeah, what was your first ride like?
So when I first started this, I actually played poker for a living for about 7 years. That's why
Awesome.
I live in Las Vegas.
Cool.
And I always kind of wanted to join the market, but I think it's very intimidating for people because nothing in your life will really relate to the information you're going to learn when you start to
Hmm.
jump into this.
Yep.
And one of my friends started doing it for probably about 3 years. And I asked him in January of one year, how he was doing. And he showed me a P&L of 95K for the month. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like he probably hit a lottery ticket or whatever, happy for him. And then in April of that same year, he was at 450K realized. And so I thought to myself, this isn't luck. Like there's actually skill involved with this. And that's when I just kind of jumped into it essentially. And it could be intimidating in the beginning just because, like I said, there's so much information to go over that you just can't really relate to. So that's why I always refer to it as like, learning a foreign language. But we have that rule that you always kind of hear about how 90% of traders lose and 10%, win. And I think that can be a little intimidating. I'm a firm believer that 90% gives up before they find success because human nature wants to blame all of their problems and issues on everything except for themselves, right? But they
Yeah.
just don't get to that step where they, push over and actually become profitable I believe anybody can do this. You just have to be able to put in the time, put in the effort and the work. It is
So there's a capacity, there's a mental capacity that I believe our generation has, and the millennial generation specifically, or even younger generations. We're trying to ride this ride, and we're trying to listen to various, resources. We're trying to keep updated. When you say there, you can't take it as a hobby, do you mean more as a day trader or as someone who just wants to make a living off of, the right investments?
correct. So when I say that you can't take this as a hobby, if you just want to invest like where you're buying, companies you believe will be around in 10 or 20 years and you want to throw money into it with every check, if you have a full-time job, that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. And I think that everybody should at least be doing that.
For
I'm
sure.
talking about taking this, as a full-time job and actually day trading and long investing for an actual career. That's when it can't become a hobby. It has to become a habit.
Of
And
course. No, I mean, things are changing really fast, especially I would say, Travis, as more and more opportunities to invest become more digital. And we don't even want to start on the conversation of NFTs and what they might become in the next 10 years, because I think half of us are still trying to figure out what they are. We have to keep up. It's just moving faster and faster, and the marketers behind it are moving faster and faster. So I do believe that what Travis is saying, I love what he's doing with capital equity options. Definitely not a paid ad, by the way, guys. Uh, met up with Travis on Twitter, which has been a really wonderful platform for our podcast. And I saw that he was doing really cool things, so I invited him on the show. And hopefully, you guys will learn a thing or two. And if you really want to, get into that realm, I would say to check out capital equity options, because it's something that I even learned exists. That can really be helpful for someone who doesn't want to get lost in the white noise that is social media. And what you want is a bit more education, rather than someone that's going to encourage you to pump and dump. And you, it's such a crude terminology, but it really is what it's called, guys. And if you're just a first time investor, you don't want to end up in that predicament. So I just want to close out, Travis, if there's anything lastly that you want to give our listeners a bit of advice on.
I just want to kind of piggyback off what you just said real quick. So you must learn how to trade on your own. You cannot follow people. Even members that are in my room, I constantly push to them that they just use me as a tool. View me as a tool
100%.
to have more information in front of your face, but always make
Yep.
your own decisions and
Love
always
it.
make your own plan.
With that said, guys, again, follow Travis at equity_options on Twitter and say hello. Ask him a couple questions yourself, or, check out his site. Until next time, guys. Stock the fuck up.